Shove it, man!
Alright, Shove It Squad, it's time for additional jab to the jaw for the week. But first, if you could all do me a favour and check out my social media and also comment and subscribe. What, do you need a bribe? I'll book you a match, a Vince Russo head on a pipe. Now am I not right? Today we're looking at 10 wrestlers who truly believe that they were an animal and not a person. So for that reason, won't see Rhino or the Bulldogs or anything like that. They've got to be wrestlers who truly were insane and thought they were peacocks or something. Who knows, let's get into it. Number 10, Sharkboy. Perhaps the most obvious inclusion in this list, so we'll be getting out of the way first. I think he believed himself to be a half man and half shark. Sharkboy made lots of appearances towards the end of WCW on C shows. He was actually starting to become established in the promotion. He entered to what sounded like the Jaws theme tune. He also did things like biting his opponents in the head and the ass. Oh, and he loved to show off the fin on his head as well. He was a cruiserweight wrestler who didn't really wrestle a cruiserweight style. The Sharkboy would go on to have a pretty good career for himself. He's probably mostly associated with TNA nowadays. When in TNA, his gimmick would change and he'd become 1/3 Shark, 1/3 Boy, and 1/3 Stone Cold Steve Austin. I'm not making this up. He did a great impression of the rattlesnake. He also won a lawsuit because the movie Sharkboy and Lava Girl used his name without his permission. As far as wrestlers go who thought they were animals, this one was pretty good. Number 9, the Bunny. One of the few modern entries on this list coming for 2014. Adam Rose had a party in Gimmick. He also had a giant white rabbit for some reason, and I don't know why, but the rabbit was able to wrestle too. The Bunny was PJ Black. From what I can tell, the whole point in this gimmick was just to make its wrestlers look stupid as Vince McMahon liked to do. Mostly to Heath Slater. On the plus side, the Bunny actually did some really cool moves, so it wasn't a complete fail, it made it a bit more tolerable. It wasn't like we were watching Hornswoggle. The story strangely ended without anything being resolved, and Adam Rose was released from the WWE. I can't say I was too bothered, but maybe some of you enjoyed the Bunny. I certainly wasn't watching WWE at this point, so you'll have to tell me. Number 8, Mantar. For this one, we're looking at the WWF in 1995. It seems pretty late for a gimmick for a man that is half man and half a cow. They put so much effort into the outfit, it's actually a big fluffy cow with horns. Then he takes the headpiece off and it's just a fat man mooing at the crowd. I'm not making this up, the guy actually mooed at them. And he did it after every move. Every damn move he moos at them. To be fair, this man actually does have a really nice range of moves. Sorry, I meant moves. His music is also mooing. He eventually ditched the cow mask, but he still acted like he was a cow. He also acquired Jim Cornette as a manager, probably not Cornette's high point. He came quite close to winning the Intercontinental title, until Mold Dog, a wild slapnuts, appears.
Double J, Jeff Jarrett.
After 6 months, they gave up on the man with the moo. He disappeared for a few years, and when he came back, he was a soldier called Tank. In my opinion, changing the T for a W would be a more accurate way to describe this gimmick. He looks so ridiculous in the army outfit. Who would have thought a cow's head would have suited him better? Number 7, the Red Rooster. I'm sure you've all heard of this one. It's gone down in wrestling history as one of the most legendary bad gimmicks of all time. The Rooster was portrayed by Terry Taylor in the late 80s. The gimmick here was, he thought he was a rooster, of course. He had long blonde hair with the top bit gelled up into a red mohawk. It looked ridiculous. He bobbed his neck and head around like a bird between moves. His music was the sound of roosters in the morning. It makes me want to throw a brick. But he didn't just think that he was a chicken. That wouldn't be enough gimmicks for one man. He was also playing the part of a man who'd forgotten how to wrestle. So every minute or so he would have to get advice from his manager Bobby Heenan. This whole thing felt like a massive punch to the gut, but Terry Taylor was a talented wrestler before being lumbered with the rooster gimmick. He actually had a decent push in the WWF, which lasted around 2 years. Unfortunately, the rest of his career was ruined as nobody would let him live the Red Rooster down. Number 6, Battle Cat. I originally thought the Mumbai Cats from Ring of King was the only time a cat gimmick had been done in wrestling. I mean, one where the wrestler actually believes himself to be a real cat. But I was wrong. The Battle Cat was portrayed by Brady Boone. He seemed to be pretty normal in the late 80s. Nothing spectacular, he was mostly just a job guy. But towards the end of 1990, Brady Boone ran to become a cat. He is the Battle Cat, but it's cat with a K, there's no need to spray. He had a big purple cat mask on with fluffy ears and glittery eyes. He doesn't really do anything cat-like though. For some reason, Brady Boone pretty quickly dropped the gimmick and another wrestler, Bob Bradley, took on the gimmick. He now truly believed he was a cat. He kept showing his claws to the crowd and crawling around on the floor like a moron. When he took damage, he frantically clawed at the air in pain. He would also hiss and roar. The entire gimmick didn't last too long and he had a brief stay in WCW and Japan. It was about 5 years ahead of its time. Or it was never in time. Well, that's not the only problem. How are you supposed to work with someone who legitimately thinks that they're a cat? Number 5, the Gooka. A new animal for the list now, and I don't think I could have ever made this video without mentioning this turkey. At the Survivor Series 1990, a massive egg was shown. It had been hyped up for weeks. For some reason, people believed that Ric Flair was going to hatch from the egg, and this is how he would debut. I wish that had happened because it sure would have been better than what we got. A giant turkey eventually hatched from the egg. It proceeded to soak up 4 minutes of the pay-per-view as it gobbled into the mic and danced with Gene Okerlund. The crowd are booing most of the way through it. Within a month, the gimmick got dropped because it was stupid and dumb. Also, the bird got blinded from its own mask and crashed into the ring. I'm a smart bird, a hawk, I would never crash. It was portrayed by Hector Guerrero, and it was supposed to be a mascot for the WWF. Instead, it's remembered as a complete fail. The Gooker would come back over the years in more recent times. Only as a joke though. Ric Flair covered in a pile of bird turd would have been a better hatch reveal. Number 4, the frog. For some reason, in the year 2000, Jamie Dundee and Wolfie D started teaming with a frog. There's literally no explanation for why these wannabe rappers would be hanging around with a man who thinks he's a frog. The only explanation I have is drugs. He's literally got dyed green hair and frog eyes. Why did he think this was a good idea? He only wrestled 3 matches in WCW, all losses in the year 2000. And in typical WCW fashion, he didn't do a frog splash. Why would you have a frog gimmick that doesn't do a frog splash? I think it's supposed to be a swerve, bro. Either way, it says his finisher is the Toad Salt. And I didn't see either of them. Not that much is known about the wrestler behind the frog. I think he also wrestled as Toad. Massive gimmick change right there. He was trained by C.W. Anderson of ECW fame. There's not much to say, he was just a stupid frog. There was also a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle gimmick, but it was dropped really quickly, and I think most people know about that. Number 3, the Shark. Second Shark wrestler gimmick entry for this list. First, let's start with John Tenta, the man who portrayed Earthquake. Tenta was a large but talented wrestler. This former sumo wrestler is most famous for teaming with Typhoon in the team The Natural Disasters. They can claim 1 tag title reign. In 1994, he signed with the WCW. They called him Avalanche. This obviously was a complete rip-off of the Earthquake character, so they were forced to change it. And what happened next was a bit weird. He was now the Shark. He has teeth painted on his face and jaws like music. He didn't really remind me of any shark I'd seen before. He didn't even have a fin, he was completely bald. Oh yeah, he was billed as being from the Tsunami. How damn witty is that? The Shark gimmick didn't work for him anyway, surprisingly. He left the WCW in 1997 and returned to the WWF. He was now one of the oddities, Giant Golga, Cartman's biggest fan. Poor guy. Number 2, Arachna Man. Pretty quick one here. This one is half man, half spider. It was really just Brad Armstrong who had several dodgy gimmicks over the years. Considering he was a spider, he sure didn't have moves or speed or agility. He was just an idiot. And only 2 months in, Marvel threatened to sue WCW for the character's close resemblance to Spider-Man. He just wasn't a good choice for a spider gimmick. He didn't seem like he even wanted to do it. He wasn't putting any effort in. He didn't have any spider-like moves and it was just dumb. And number 1, the dog. Poor Al Green. This gimmick makes me go through several different waves of emotion. Mostly, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And then the next minute, I'm like, oh, I actually feel sorry for the dog. Al Green was a former Master Blaster with Kevin Nash. He never seemed to find much success in the WCW, so I guess they thought they would turn him into a dog. I bet he wished he'd stayed as a Master Blaster. Now what makes this gimmick different to the other ones on this list is the dog actually acted like a dog and didn't display any human emotion. He didn't talk, he barked. He ripped and chewed up furniture. He drank from the toilet and he was walked around on a lead. Now when I describe it like that, it all sounds hilarious. And it would be if it was a happy story. But unfortunately it's a very sad story, girls, so you all better get your handkerchiefs out. The seats are filthy. The dog was owned by Finley and Brian Knobbs for some reason. They would hide his head before matches and then remove the hood and he would go nuts, like an attack dog would. The dog had some decent power moves in the ring, but he mostly lost his matches. Because of these losses, Brian Knobbs kept beating his pet with a chain and beating him backstage in the locker rooms. Someone call the RSPCA. Eventually, Knobbs made the cruel decision to drive the dog out to the middle of nowhere and ditch him. The dog looked up at the moon and howled with sadness. I'm not making any of this up, it all legitimately happened in WCW. And it was the late 90s too. The dog found his way back to WCW and tried to get his revenge on Brian Knobbs, but was unsuccessful. After a 2-month run, he was gone. An extremely weird time, and this is a gimmick I'd love to know more about. Sadly, Al Green has passed away, so we won't hear from him. But that's my 10. Did I miss any wrestlers out who legitimately thought they were animals? I've tried to focus this on the mainstream companies. I know there's some weird stuff going down on the indies.
The space cat!
I could have potentially included Coco Beware, but I didn't feel like he truly believed he was a bird. And I do. There's only room for one bird around here, and if you don't agree with that, I'll give you something to fear.